Hi you guys, welcome back. My name is Carrie Penny. I am the Happy Crafty Homemaker, and today we're going to be having what I have a feeling is going to be a fairly divisive crafty chat. I'm not one to typically jump into drama and want to generate drama here on my channel. So I do ask, even if you disagree with me or comments in the comment section down below, the only thing I ask for is that you are respectful to one another and respectful to me. You can disagree all you want, but there is a way to be respectful about disagreeing. I am speaking off the cuff, kind of. I kind of have a couple of notes in my notebook of things I want to make sure that I hit, but I have not scripted this conversation out, so I will probably bumble over words and things. Don't hold it against me too hard. If you are not in the mood for a difficult conversation as creatives and content creators, this might not be the video for you. So please feel free to come back for a show and tell video. Please go back and check out the Southern Comforts Fiber Market. There's plenty of other videos here if you were just dying for some Carrie content. But I do want to kind of jump right in here because I have a feeling this conversation is going to probably span, or some variation of this conversation will probably span multiple videos here over the next coming months. I'm not going to say it's going to be a weekly thing for 3 weeks because I am in the middle of moving. We are inching very close to our closing date. I am also in the process of trying to get a repair done at my house that we're trying to sell. So it is going to be a very busy fall for me and my family. So I am not going to promise when these videos will come out, but just know there is no way I can cover everything I want to say in this zone in one video. So one place I want to start off here is the obligation and responsibility of us content creators, whether we're sharing on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook, on a blog post. We have a responsibility to be cognizant of our space, our community, and the difference between manners and legal rights. So we're going to kind of start diving straight in here. I know a number of you guys are familiar with the drama that's been going on TikTok. I'm not getting into that drama specifically because what has happened in the course of what is currently going on has occurred before, will continue to occur, and occurs in microgroups within other social media platforms. I know of a number of people who have been banned off of Facebook, completely deplatformed over the years for very heavy-handed, antagonistic conversations in this same kind of way. So this is as content creators and as designers and as project sharers, we need to be very careful about what we say, how we present ourselves in the online forum. No differently than you see somebody having a bad day at Starbucks getting canceled. We can't afford, if this is our avenue for sharing our business or for creating a business or for our personality being what we're selling, we can't afford to libel somebody else in the process. We can't afford to deteriorate our brand integrity by maybe making a knee-jerk comment or reaction to something. We need to, when we come into the public forum and into the public space, we need to be very calm. We need to let anger abate. We need to let emotions abate and not just grab our phones and say whatever we feel like saying in the moment, because that can have dire consequences for us as content creators, for us as business owners, for us as brand owners, if we're not careful about how we address this or address our feelings about these kinds of things. So in the past, I have mentioned there, I think it was a Vlogmas, like my first or second Vlogmas series that I did, where I literally watched somebody lose their entire reputation in the crochet community by writing a new designer. They called their publisher, they called them, they blasted them by name across every social media platform they could get their hands on, saying that they stole work, that they stole ideas, that this was horrible, and so in 1974 published and here he is stealing the idea. And the truth is you can't copy mark or trademark an idea. And particularly in our sphere, we can copyright and trademark our photos, our logos, our written words on paper, our actual directions of how we do things. But our projects and somebody knocking them off, or a design that we have and somebody doing a knockoff or their own version, or changing it from a sewing pattern to a knitting pattern, or a knitting pattern to a crochet pattern, especially when we're not talking about an item for sale that we're selling. Unfortunately, the truth is, imitation is a compliment. If somebody is trying to undercut our profit margin, say we knit this specific shawl, this is all we do, this is all we make, people are going to knock it off. It's going to happen. People are going to knock it off. And then even worse, if we're sharing it in this social media landscape and then getting mad that somebody knocks off our design and makes their own, or has purchased our pattern and is making it. So we have to be very, very careful about how we approach things that maybe we don't agree with. I know there have been quite a few people who have been sued over libel cases, slander cases, because they make these knee-jerk social media videos about how they're feeling about something. And in the process, they're libeling somebody or slandering somebody. And sometimes these people have been deplatformed. Sometimes these people have had to issue dramatic apologies. Sometimes these people have been sued and lost actual cash money that they could not afford to lose in the process. So we need to be very, very careful as content creators how we approach things that maybe rub us the wrong way or feel like they're encroaching into our personal space. So I want to open up with that, or wanted to open up specifically with our duties and responsibilities as a content creator, to understand also part of the reason we share in the DIY space is so we inspire other people to make, create, and or maybe even purchase our own products that we're selling, or purchase through our affiliate links the companies we're working with. You know, there are lots of people who have lines of products that are being sold to go along with the DIYs that we produce. There have been many people within our Yarny space who have had lines like Deborah Norville, Vicki Howell, Vanna White, and they have very specific lines that they have had from these companies that they're designing with, publishing patterns, and sharing their lines. So it's a collaboration or a business venture between multiple companies. Not to mention, I know that there are a lot of people like Stephen West who work with indie dyers to dye yarn for them, and they have collections with some of these independent dyers. There are also people who create certain aesthetics and have custom print fabric that is sold, or they make their own stickers to promote their brand or their aesthetic or their style. So when we come into the social platform, we're selling ourselves, we're selling our ideas, we're sharing with the hope to inspire. And many of us, I don't personally, but many of us also have some form of secondary revenue that we're anticipating, if not expecting and counting on, that are coming in with our brand deals, with our what have you, that go into that. So we have a responsibility to ourselves. We have a responsibility in our social space here. We have a global space. Our world has moved to a global economy. Our world has moved to a global sharing space We're seeing more and more international designers that are really striking it big here in the US, which is where I'm located, in smaller communities, smaller areas. We're seeing more and more people how to read Japanese pattern design for crochet. There are actually people who are sharing understanding, Japanese construction of crochet, which is different than Western understandings of construction with crochet. There are people who are sharing these design elements or these techniques in the global media now, in our global area here on this platform and many others. And that's a wonderful thing. That's an important thing for us as creatives to be exposed to multiple different styles, textures, techniques, colors, color palettes, usage, design, concepts. Because what I think the whole purpose is to sharing in a DIY space like this, from our projects to our DIY process, I think a huge reason why we need to be sharing these things, or why we ought to be sharing these things, is to inspire other people to create within their own space. Sometimes that's going to be, they took this idea and ran off with it and did, something completely, wholly differently. Prime example is I've had a couple of people now design a sweater out of my half circle shawl tutorial. I shared a shawl, they made a sweater. I've had a couple people approach me, there's a video that's using your shawl to make a sweater. Yeah, she made a sweater. She designed a sweater. Just because she used the basic shape I put out there, that's her design. The sweater is her design. Mine was how I did the increasing on the placket, but even I knew that was a basic shape from wherever I learned that in the annals of the last 30 years, 35 years as a crocheter, of knowledge and experience, patterns I've come across, books I've come across. So I can't even wholly claim original inspiration or original design. And design cycles every 30 years or every 20 years. We see a design cycle where things come back from 20 years previous. So a truly unique design or idea is very, very uncommon in an art space. We swipe and combine constantly. That is what we do as creatives, whether we see it as that or not. The odds of us creating a wholly and truly unique thing that in no way, shape, or form has been inspired by or anything else, anyone else, is slim to none. I'm probably going to cycle very frequently through our crafty space as fiber artists, but this applies across the arts industry as a whole. We constantly are taking inspiration in, whether it's the butterfly that landed on the flower this morning that we saw, or we saw this construction idea in a sewing pattern and decided to implement it into knitting and crochet. We are constantly adding new information into our brain that we are combining together to create new things. So even in our own design, while it may be not anything you've ever seen before as a whole, multiple parts of that were inspired or taken directly from another artist somewhere in the arts community. And that's how we develop, that's how we grow, that's how we do get refreshes on a technique. One of my favorite heels for socks is Earth Tone Girl's heel. And I've promoted this 9 million times on my channel, but it is a slip stitch heel. Slip stitch heels have been around for a long time. Her pattern just happens to A, make perfect sense, and B, she developed it further to meet her needs and decided to change it into a written pattern so we could also consume her knowledge and information from having done these before. But she would never claim the slip stitch heel is only hers and hers alone, that she is the inventor of this heel. Her directions for how to achieve that heel is her unique intellectual property. And understanding the difference between unique intellectual property, which is our words on paper in our industry primarily, versus our aesthetic or process. And that's a huge difference. You can't say, here's how I did this, and then be mad when somebody else does it. Or you are out and about in the general sphere of existence and somebody's like, oh, I like that. So they go home and they either buy or create something that looks very similar to what they've seen that you've got. Whether it's a tie-dye t-shirt or the way they've painted their space to accommodate their aesthetic, whether they're a very cute aesthetic or a horror aesthetic, or they've got a, pastel goth aesthetic. You can't, and I hate to use the phrase gatekeep visual content. It's out there for all of us to consume. And when you're the content creator producing content into the sphere, you're going to reach a much larger audience, which means you're probably going to come across somebody who really identifies and goes, yes, that's what I've been looking for. And they may become inspired to document their journey. They may also enjoy the process. They may also enjoy your color palette. When you reach out into a global world, you're going to find duplications. You're going to find people who are looking for that thing. They couldn't put their finger on it, and you inspired them with how you did it or what you did. But when you're the one making the content, I know it can brush up against you the wrong way when somebody else is also sharing their same journey while being inspired by you. That can be a little rough feeling on your insides. You can feel a little copycatted. You can feel a little violated, but at the same time, you're the one who opted to share that content. And if somebody else is going through the same process and there, slight deviations, maybe it doesn't feel like enough deviation for you, sorry, I just got a text message. Hold on one moment. Sorry, answering your realtor when you're trying to sell your house is something you actually need to pause and do. But I understand that it can rankle us or make us feel a little taken for granted or a little copied. But we are content creators with DIY in mind, not just us making, but also us inspiring or us teaching or us showing somebody the process to achieve the same thing. And I think that's why this conversation has been very different throughout what I'm seeing on social media recently, because it feels like it's focusing on the content creation, and a lot of it has been obviously focused heavily on TikTok because that's what spurred the conversation. And TikTok is a new medium, and that it has brought a new group of people into the conversations on sharing and media. Also, part of the problem with content like TikTok or any short form content like that, all we have to do is pick up our phone and vent, or pick up our phone and blast. And that ties back to my original point of our responsibility of making sure we're not doing that. Because once again, that can come back against us in a very negative way. We have to be very careful about what we say is a public statement. What you utter in private in your home is perfectly fine, and even in private conversations, but when you publish a statement or a comment or a short form video or a live that is damaging to another person potentially, or is blasting your customer base, which I've unfortunately seen this now happen a couple of times, where designers will share exactly the supplies they use, exactly what they did to do this, and then be mad somebody else created the exact same thing. Maybe that's a person who needs to take a step back and decide why they're creating media, why they're creating in these social spaces to begin with. But in our DIY sphere, the goal is to create do-it-yourself content so other people can do it. If you want to be an artist who just sells their things, or is hired as an interior designer, or is hired as a costume designer, or is hired in a design house, you're still, once the finished object is put on display in a movie, a TV show, an art gallery, on a runway, you're still going to have copycatting go on. I mean, within 24 hours of a runway show for street fashion in New York or Milan or Paris, we immediately in 24 hours have knockoffs online available to purchase from these beautiful designers who did create that look. So once it's in the public sphere, once we put it out there, or it is put out there through our employer or anything else, it's now out there to be duplicated. It's now out there to be copied. And while we can have a conversation like this where, you know, it does leave you feeling a way about it. I understand that. I really, really do understand it can leave us feeling a way about it. But it is what it is. I mean, you either hold your art in and never share it with anybody, or you share it with the intention of creating legacy. When I was having this conversation with my mom, because I kind of bounced the idea of whether or not to even do this video off of her, because I was trying to work through maybe more of my talking points a little bit better. One of the things we talked about was the LBD. Coco Chanel coined the phrase, the little black dress. And at no point in time did she actually trademark LBD, I don't think, as a phrase. And it has now entered into normal nomenclature where that is in fashion. If you say an LBD or a little black dress, everybody knows the concept of what you're talking about, whether they understand that is a phrase coined by Coco Chanel to talk about you only need this one piece to carry you through all seasons. You can dress it up, you can dress it down, you can take it to a funeral or a wedding, happy occasion, sad occasion. Every woman needs an essential little black dress. And she had her designs for LBDs, but the concept of that form of fashion is something that she really did drive home. And that is one of her many unique things that she entered into women's lives. And we now have LBDs all over the place, people that actually have named their brand Little Black Dress because that's all they make is little black dresses for women to wear as their wardrobe staple. And we talked about Dior and the new look and how that was copied across the world post-World War II. So we've seen in fashion things like that spread. I don't know how many of you guys have watched The Devil Wears Prada. Hilarious movie. It's a little on the superficial side, but Meryl Streep's character makes an excellent point. I now just totally brain dumped. She's acting like she's superior because she's not so superficial. She's into fashion. And Meryl Streep's character says, okay, well, so-and-so did an entire collection in spring 4 years ago in that exact shade of blue. Over the course of the last 4 years, it has filtered down to whatever discount basement you bought it out of. So that color blue came from my world to you, not the other way around. And it's a fair enough point. We see things that, you know, while we may not necessarily be wanting to bring them back, but we see fashion recycle. We see color palettes recycle. We see fashion moving from the high fashion industry and names that most of us can't really afford down to the Wish and Temu level where we can. And we've got to understand that as designers, things are going to be taken, sometimes not even really modified, and moved on. If I can see it, I can recreate it. You can't gatekeep visual art. It's just something we can't do. And because we're making the choice to share our process for creating visual art or our idea for visual art, we're opening ourselves up to directly to imitation, whether it be direct imitation or inspiration. That's the nature of being a DIY channel. That's kind of what the entire DIY environment is for. So you have to ask yourself, are you creating content just so you can get personal gratification because somebody's going to pat you on the back and say, oh, attaboy? Or are you creating content to inspire and leave a legacy and a mark in what is now a quick form global communication system that we have on these social platforms? And to me, my idea, not even is legacy. I'm not even thinking big terms. I don't want to be the next Chanel or the next Dior in a design inspiration. I want to inspire you guys personally to create what makes you happy and brings you joy. And if I can share something that will do that, I see that as a win for me. I know a number of you guys have made my patterns. A number of you guys have purchased things that you've seen me purchase. I try to share information with you guys. I am more of an information channel by and large than I am a DIY tutorials channel. But I do share with you how I make alterations, how I make changes, what I did to kind of tweak it to suit my purposes. And I want you to have that information so you can also do that if that's what you're looking for. I'm not looking for legacy necessarily, but I definitely would love to be an inspiration as far as you like my color palette, you like what I did with that, you like the detailing of that. I love hearing that I'm an inspiration to you. I gave you inspiration for a project. I gave you a new way to looking at your craft or even the world around you sometimes. And this is one of those videos where I'm really trying to be careful as far as what I'm saying, because I don't want to create offense. I understand the negative feelings you can also have, but art is about expression and sharing, and once we share it, it can be copied. Once it's seen, it can be duplicated. And yes, you can feel a way about it, and not all people are given credit for the inspiration. Personally, I think that's good manners. I think you really ought to, because you ought to want to also share that somebody else has done this as well. You should want to give people, if they're inspired by you or like what they see from you, they should, I always tell you guys, go on Ravelry and see what other people have done with something. Because I don't want to be your sole source of inspiration. When I'm giving you a product review, I tell you to go check other sources as well, because I don't want you to feel backed into the corner based only on my opinion, my words, and what I have to say. So, you know, I think it's only good manners, especially as an American creating projects, to share my source inspiration. But there's a difference, once again, between manners and legal obligation. And technically, there is no legal obligation in the US to share that. I could make something that looks similar to the Molly Weasley sweater and just say it's a scrappy sweater. And there's nothing legally wrong with that. Now, if I took that and sold it as a Molly Weasley sweater, we're opening up a whole different cans of worms as far as like law. And I'm not a lawyer. While I do heavily understand a lot of the rules in fashion law, I am not a lawyer. But that's a whole nother subject that we can definitely have a conversation about here on this platform, and particularly how pattern law works in the US, which I think is interesting, because very few times is law very finite, and pattern law in the US is actually a very finite part of our legal system here. So we do have to understand that when we're putting our content out there, when we're putting out our processes, when we're putting out our ideas, designs, combinations, we are going to have people who do it because they're inspired to do it from what the content we're creating. And many of those people, because we are in an easy access sharing of social information world now, some of those people will also be sharing that exact same content because they're also going through the journey of designing something or sharing something or doing something or making something using our inspiration. Should they give credit? Sure. Are they legally responsible to say, oh, I was inspired by XYZ? Not in the States, you're not. So I do think as DIY arts and crafts content creators, we really do need to be mindful of why we're sharing our content. Because personally, especially in the DIY arena, I really think teaching people and inspiring people should be your motivation to create those content, because instant accolades, if that's all you're looking for, somebody's going to see your idea and do it better. And then you're going to feel like poops. I mean, no offense, but that's going to make you feel super rotten. So if you're looking for instant accolades, if you're looking for that attaboy, I would probably move into the market of selling items instead of creating social content looking for those accolades, because it will be done differently. It will be done again. And truthfully, when we're talking about design and fashion, like I've said, we've got a 20-year cycle on that. It's going to come back again, and it's going to go away again, and it's going to come back again, and it's going to go away again. I mean, we've seen, the blast of the 90s fashion, which for my mom is horribly cringy because now this is her third time seeing flared pants, crop tops, the hair combs and things like that of the 1970s. And she didn't like them in the 70s. She didn't like them in the 90s. And she sure as shoot does not like seeing them again now. And we have these repeats constantly. So if you're just creating content for your accolades, you might want to take a step back and maybe find a different way to find that attaboy you're searching for. Because if you're in the DIY space, people are going to copy you because you're teaching them how to do something. You're teaching them about a technique. You're teaching them about a design. You're teaching them how to copy you. And I think that's something we really need to be aware of as content creators, that if we're looking for just the attaboy, we might want to just sell designs. We might just want to sell product, or we might want to re-engineer how we're sharing our designs and our products, because maybe you still want to have the social aspect. That's still how you want to promote your business, but instead of giving us a process video, give us a before and after. So once again, this is part of that responsibility of the content creator. One of the other things, and I've kind of brushed up against it a little bit here, is ownership of creative designs. So many years ago, I told you guys I was absolutely horrified. I had just watched a video where a content creator here on this platform was blasting a designer directly by name, naming his publisher, naming his soon-to-be delivered books, and saying, he's a thief, he's a horrible person, how could he do this? He stole this from somebody else. This was a vicious assault. I mean, I've got to say, if words could be considered assault, this particularly was a very vicious assault. She went to the publisher and said the publisher should remove the book, that it's theft, it's intellectual property theft, that this person's a horrible human being. She blasted him on social media. I'm pretty sure she got a legal C&D letter to tell her to take the video down and stop calling the publishing house. The original person they were trying to protect, whose intellectual property they were trying to protect, in their opinion, most villains are the hero in their own story. Please remember this. She felt like she was protecting this person who wrote content in the 1970s. And the original designer said, that's not theft. That's not my design. I didn't do that. This is their own version of what I did. This is new intellectual property being created. Stop. And I thought that was very telling of the quality of the character of the intended protectee. It showed real caliber of character and moral fiber to address this directly with the content creator and say, stop. Like you are creating a witch hunt for nobody. I really was shocked that that occurred. I give them accolades and kudos for doing that. I do not believe the content creator is creating content anymore. I am pretty sure they deplatformed themselves if they were not requested to be deplatformed. This did turn into, for like 72 hours, a really big deal for a lot of people. It impacted and affected a lot of people for a short period of time. So ownership of our ideas, and this is where we kind of start butting up against legal definitions and manners. So we are constantly swiping ideas. We graze our landscape and absorb what we see. We're little intellectual sponges normally. We are made to learn and explore our environment. We're made to learn and explore new ideas and new ways of looking. As a creative, we're constantly on the outlook for that next inspiration point. And we really need to be very careful about what we declare ownership of, because whether we realize it or not, many of us are taking multiple pieces of information and putting them together. And if we decide this belongs to us only, this is our intellectual property, this aesthetic, this design, this build, whatever it is we're doing. If we decide we're taking ownership of this and we're going to go after people who duplicate this, copy this, or imitate this, all of those design elements we've incorporated into what we feel like is our intellectual property can come after pieces of your own pie. And we've got to be very honest with ourselves as designers. And, you know, I am just now getting to where I'm trying to put pen to paper and writing out more designs. I do have a written version of my circle and a square pattern. But to be honest, and like I told you in the tutorial and when I made the original autumn blanket, this was not wholly original to me. I had seen multiple variations of a circle and a square and kind of combined information from multiple points to develop my personal version of a circle and a square pattern. Same thing as my half circle shawl, which is my most viewed video, by the way. I think that's really cool. It is a basic shape to crochet a shawl in a half circle. And this is a basic shape. It's not, the only thing I did to make it a pattern is I added eyelet rows. But truthfully, and with most of my tutorials, I'm sharing with you guys basic shapes, basic concepts, basic designs. I'm not sharing with you guys necessarily a pattern. I am trying to get better at pattern writing and things like that, but we do have to be very careful as designers what we're claiming ownership over. Because if I sell my pattern to you and you make the item, as long as there's no trademark infringement with, you know, like, I know there are people who make things from media, say like a cartoon or a movie series or something, and they're selling it as an item from that thing and not using inspired by. You can get in some trouble there because Disney, Warner Brothers, Nintendo all own a lot of rights to a lot of these things I see people trying to write patterns for. If you're giving it away for free, you're fine, as long as it's not for trade. I can't just make an Eeyore and sell it. I can't just make a Pikachu and sell it legally. Nintendo, though, does have some weird rules with theirs. Sometimes they're okay with fan art being sold. Sometimes they're not. It depends on who the CEO of their company is and who's the head of legal at the time. There is some nuance to that specifically one, but Disney has very hard and fast rules who they send C&Ds to, and you know, it's bitten them in the butt before, where people are buying licensed fabrics and selling items made out of the licensed fabric, which they've purchased the right to use that fabric in any way, shape, or form they please, and selling the finished object is included in that. I cannot, however, just make my own Tinkerbell doll and sell it as Tinkerbell. I can sell it as a fairy, but I cannot sell it as a Tinkerbell doll because I did not purchase a license from Disney to use their stuff. So, assuming you're not butting up into another business's copyright or trademark, you're creating what you feel is unique intellectual property. If I purchase your pattern or you purchase my pattern, make that pattern and sell the item you make. In the States, that's perfectly legal. You can request people not do that because they might be cutting into another part of your business, which is selling the finished object. If that is the case, as a just personal observation, if you're making that much money off your finished objects, I would not sell your pattern. I would allow for copycatting because you can't do anything about that, but I would not sell my pattern. I would keep that pattern under wraps like Coca-Cola does the recipe for Coke. If that's how much money you're making on your finished objects. Now, what I can't do or you can't do once you've purchased a pattern is duplicate the words in the pattern. You can redesign it, reword it, rewrite it in your own words. I think that's, once again, we're talking about manners versus legal. I think that's really bad manners. I think that's, but theoretically, if you take all new pictures and you write all new words and descriptions for it and you do all new directions for it, technically you can get away with it and it's fine. But we've got to be very careful at what we're claiming ownership over, because that also, it's not just we don't technically own a visual aesthetic or a visual thing. If I can see it, I can duplicate it. I don't necessarily have to have your written directions or your video directions for how to do it, because in theory I could see it and recreate it. Remember, the preponderance of the evidence is if I can see it, I can recreate it. And there's a lot of things that butts up against in the conversations I'm seeing on social media. But when we, not just as a we can't do that. We can't take ownership of it. But also, if we're going to take ownership of it, remember that opens us up from every point of inspiration we drew. That opens us up to also receiving somebody taking a cut of that pie. If I say if I go after somebody for making and selling my half circle shawl, not only could I, if the law permitted that, and it does not, but if, say, I went after somebody for making it and selling it, or redescribing what I described in my tutorial, or writing their own version of the pattern, if I had a written pattern for it, every single pattern writer who wrote anything similar to what I feel like I designed could then come after me and sue me for the theft of their intellectual property as well. So this isn't I'm not trying to tell you to be cautious about what you do as a designer or media sharer or anything else, because I want anarchy on our platform, and I want to see anarchy, and I want people duplicating and copying every which way. I'm also cautioning you heavily as to what you take ownership over for your own safety and security. And this has happened in the past, and this I'm sure will happen again, where people have had legal action where they're going after another creator and they're being sent C&Ds, where they're blasting people and being sued for libel, where, you know, we have an emotional response to seeing somebody copying us at times and maybe doing something with our stuff that we don't want them to do, and we want to put a stop on it. We want to shame them. We want to call this a problem or create a problem out of it, or we just want to vent. Sometimes we just need that emotional outlet to vent. And when we start claiming that ownership, every other person who's done it before us that we took inspiration from would then be able to come after us. That's actually one of the reasons why the law is written the way it is as far as those kinds of things. It is a mutually protective law. And in the US, like I said, very rarely is law so explicit and black and white as to what you can own and what you cannot own. But when it comes to a lot of branding stuff, the law is very specific. When it comes to fashion law, which is what most of us that watch my channel really would fall into, is fashion law, because we're doing, you know, knitting, crocheting, sewing. Art law, when it comes to ownership of an aesthetic, a color palette, or a design. You know, there's nothing wrong with literally recreating Van Gogh's Starry Night as long as your name is signed at the bottom. I mean, it would, you know, the title of my piece, if I could paint at all and I recreated Starry Night in my own vision or my own style, it would be Starry Night inspired by and by, not signing somebody else's name. That's what makes it a forgery. And I think that's kind of where with the social media content that we have now kind of all culminates into these we feel these nebulous bad thoughts when we see people duplicating and copying us, when we see people trying to take our style, take our information. We feel personally attacked by it, but truthfully, that is kind of the nature of the beast that we got into by sharing on social media. People are going to see it, be inspired by it, or people are going to see it and copy it. Once again, anything I can see, presumably I can recreate. And, you know, when it comes to commerce laws and whether or not it's a forgery, trademark infringement, copyright law, that's a whole different thing, because you have to be selling something in order to fall under those things. But if you're just creating, even just creating content, we have to be careful. So I know this is kind of like I kind of hit all of my subjects here, and this is already turning into a very long video, which is what I really didn't want to say. But I did really want to have this conversation with you guys, because I see trends coming back towards this very, I find it to be irresponsible media sharing. I find it to be selfish to a certain degree, as we're looking for our own personal rewards instead of the rewards of having shared information to inspire and help others to create, or help other people on their path to creation. But also, if you take ownership of something, you are now responsible on your end for having not also stolen, knocked off, copied, or repeated something that somebody else has done. So we can't really assume in the art world and the arts world, it is very hard to say that you have ownership. While we hear of big cases of, like in the music industry, where somebody sued because they copied something, ripped something like that. When you look at the thousands of cases versus the tens of cases that are lost by the current artists, even then, it's very hard to prove inspiration versus copying and whether or not there should be an infringement. A lot of times, some people will say, okay, I'll buy you in for 1% just to be done with the person. But, you know, very few of these are actually won in court cases by the prosecution or by the claimant. So when we take ownership in our artwork, we have to understand if we're assuming ownership of something like that, that's not our actual words or our photographs, our tangible intellectual properties. And we've freely shared directions on how to do things, how to see things, how to visualize things, where we're getting things from. Somebody could easily come around and say we're the thief, because we're now assuming ownership over what they perceive as their idea that came before us. And in fashion, art, and culture, all things come back into style. So we have to be very careful about declaring true ownership over something and not inspired by. Now, like I said, I think it's good manners if I see something I like and I make something similar, to give credit to the person I was inspired by. It's good manners. But once again, my legal responsibility in the US, once again, please remember, laws are different in other countries. I am pretty sure in Europe and the UK, there are certain things you have to accredit your original inspiration from and other things that you don't. So please remember, I'm speaking as an American in the American commerce and the American media. I think it's good manners and only appropriate to share credit for the inspiration, or say, I saw this on TikTok, I saw this on Pinterest, and at least give somebody an idea of where they could have possibly gotten the inspiration for something or gotten the idea for something. Good manners. But my legal responsibility is something separate from manners. And legally in the States, it's not required to express my original inspiration for something. And I've told you guys, I've been around the crochet world in particular for 35 years now. I just turned 40 yesterday. Today's Thursday as I'm filming this. I just turned 40 yesterday. I've been crocheting since I was 5. For 35 years, I have been consuming crochet content. And there are many, many, many times where I tell you guys, I'm not sure where I originally saw this. There are things like the fold over pot holder. I know that Margaret Olander has a great tutorial on how to do it, but even she's not sure where the origination point is for this because it's been around forever. My great-grandmother and my grandmother used to also make the same pot holder. I've been around the block long enough that I've seen things come in and out of style. I've seen, I remember the last time chenille yarn was popular, and then it came back in with all these softies and loveys and things in 2020. And the chenille yarn thing was a huge market with things like parfait, Bernat blanket, things like that. I've been around long enough where I've seen the cycle come through more than one full round. So when we're talking about these design elements and in the arts community, things cycle and they're going to come back through and they're going to come back around. At some point along the line, in the last 40 years, somebody has done something similar. Look at 2 full fashion cycles. Somebody has done something similar. And similar enough, they could be your inspiration point. So this is why, as a content creator myself, I think it's a very important conversation to have. And I know a number of the people who watch my channel are also young content creators, young in the amount of time we've been creating the content. I think this is a very important thing to understand and in moving forward within our space and defining for ourselves where we want to be in the space. Do we really want to be a DIY person who's inspiring and teaching people to create? Or do we just want to do our own shares and share our business and maybe sell finished items only? that's really why I wanted to come in here and have this conversation. I also wanted to kind of see some of you guys' feedback. Like I said, though, if you disagree with anything I've said here, please be respectful. Disagreement is perfectly fine. I really do enjoy conversation, but I do ask that you are respectful and polite to me and to the other commenters here. I have really cultivated a community here on my channel of people who have no problem having a conversation. And I expect the conversation to be polite. That's it. That is the only rule in my community as a whole, is we need to be polite to each other. We can disagree all day. We can have different opinions all day, but we need to be polite to each other. Like I said, moral responsibility versus legal responsibility. So please, act with personal dignity if you're going to leave a comment down below and disagree with me. And if you agree with me and somebody disagrees with me, please also be polite to that person, because they also have a valid viewpoint, whether or not they agree with me or not. Anyway, be respectful, but I really want to hear what you guys have to say about this. I also would be interested in some of the instances you guys have seen where these things have become problematic in some of the groups you're in. I am a member of a lot of different groups, from paper crafting, Cricut crafts, crochet, knitting, sewing, and I've seen it really heavily in those groups, but oddly enough, it's not quite as prevalent in the 3D printing group. You do have a slightly different dynamic within those groups, don't get me wrong, but I haven't seen it as much in the 3D printing community, but I'm also pretty new to observing that as a whole. But I would be interested in seeing where you guys have seen some of these things kind of crop up, or something that kind of made you think, red flags, whoa, shut your mouth, with something somebody has shared. Because like I said, I've seen it a couple of times. I've seen it to the extreme degree where somebody has seen financial detriment or personal detriment or progression in their field detriment to doing or behaving or saying something they really shouldn't have. So I just kind of want to know what you guys think, what you guys see. I love you guys. As always, I will see you real soon. Please take care of yourselves. Bye, guys.